Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé F1 podcast number 864, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camber. You know what we do on race weekends. You know this. We do this every time there's a race.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
That's exactly what we do. And tonight, we're going to review the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, but what's really strange, you might have noticed my co-host tonight, that's right, I got to go all the way to the right coast of our nation, nestled in our nation's capital, where she plies her skills as a master statistician and a person who can cram in football, basketball, hockey, MotoGP, and an F1 race all in one weekend. You know her, you love her, the lovely, the redoubtable Grace. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Todd. It was in fact a very busy weekend, but you know, it's what I get paid the big bucks for, right?
Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And for those of you out there saying, "Well, wait a minute, Grace doesn't normally do race reviews," you'd be right. It's just that the dirty little secret here is, folks, this podcast doesn't make enough money to pay Paul just to be on call whenever I need him. And, right. You know, now that Paul is the sporting manager of the Harder Racing Aston Martin team in Le Mans and IMSA, you know, he's in high demand these days. And my checks aren't as big as Heart of Racing's checks. So there you go.
No. His check has more zeros with numbers in front of the zeros.
Yes. Yeah, I got a lot of zeros in my check that
No
I
numbers.
send Paul, but his has numbers in front of the zeros. So, yeah, unfortunately, well, no, Paul, you know, obviously he would love to be here because he's a charming and delightful guy, but he is on duty for Heart of the Racing. He's out west testing out some running of the female drivers for Heart of Racing. So, anyway, wish him the best and have a lot of fun out there, Mr. Paul. But in a crunch,
no cover.
You know, you got to call Grace and say, Grace,
Come here.
Can you review the race? And Grace usually says, yeah, that means I'll need to take some notes.
I actually have to pay attention to the whole thing.
Gonna have to
and
watch
not
the whole
maybe
race.
take a nap.
Yeah, no naps for this race.
No naps. I got to pay attention.
I got to watch the second pit stop for everybody? Come on.
Oh, boy. Not everybody took 2 pit stops. Carlos
Not
Sainz.
everybody, Valtteri Bottas.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, no, it was fine. It was lovely.
Yeah.
You know. But yes, it is always good to know ahead of time because otherwise it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's some boats.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy because he gave me like 24-hour notice, which is good. You know, sometimes it's a little shorter with Paul. You know, he's like the Ferrari strategy team on sometimes. You know, you never know. So.
We're checking.
We're checking. Yeah. He's in high demand. You know, when you're dashingly handsome like Paul, everybody wants you everywhere.
That's right. We literally do that in public, Flip and I. And I'm sure people are like, what? He'll ask me a question. I'll go, we're checking. Hold on. I'll tell you.
Oh, ouch.
Stand by.
Ouch.
Yeah, I know. People are probably like, what?
Yeah, I
don't know. It really never stops being funny. So.
Well, let's talk about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix this weekend.
Do it.
It was the 22nd race of the season and the final race of the season. Now, whether Max won or not wasn't really the focal point of Abu Dhabi. And apart from some media stories drudging up the 2021 every year, you know, and everybody getting animated about that, they just milk that thing. You know, it's 2 or 3 years on. They're 10 years. They're going to be milking that thing. But anyway, the real story this weekend was for second place and fourth place in the constructors 100%. Title, and fourth and seventh, fourth place in the driver's title and seventh in the constructors title as well. So those were the big thing, and this is real money. So for every
big time.
spot that you lose or gain, it's $10+ million. So it's real money on the line there. And as you can imagine, for a team like Williams, a team like Haas, that's big money, and it's important.
Williams, that's huge.
It's huge. But it's also big for a team like Mercedes, like Ferrari, $10 million.
Of course.
Yes. You know, that does move the meter on their P&L.
Just like each of us with our individual budgets, right? More money is more money, right?
Yeah.
And, it's fine.
Yeah, it is. Perhaps the other talking point out of the weekend, which was kind of funny, was the rumors of Lewis Hamilton poking around at Red Bull. That had the headlines, but, it was like Christian Horner said that the Hamilton camp had talked to Red Bull, and then Toto went ballistic. And then, Lewis quickly was in the press saying, I never talked to Christian. I don't know what he's thinking about. And then Christian sort of backed that up and said, well, it was actually Lewis's dad that I talked to about it,
Whatever.
And so, Toto and everybody's all upset about it. But here's the thing, folks. I'll be honest with you. I get it. Nobody wants that kind of information floating out in the public, maybe. But here's the thing of it. If I'm Lewis Hamilton, I'd be offended if my management didn't go test the waters at other teams before I renewed a contract with Mercedes. I want to find a winning car. Red Bull's one, maybe Ferrari's one. And at the time that he was probably having these conversations, Mercedes was still, on life support with their car before they made the radical change. So I would want my management team out there marketing me, finding me the best option, possibly the best car, and the most money. So, to come out and get all offended about it, I don't know. I would want Lewis's team to do that.
It's no different than any other job.
No.
You don't just jump ship without doing some research, talking to some people that are already working at that organization. And sometimes the only way you get a bonus at your organization or a promotion at your organization is to be like, oh, yeah, by the way, I was just talking to so-and-so, and they have some positions opening. And all of a sudden your management's like, oh, maybe we should stop sitting on this person's genius. So
right.
I just took all of that as that's just normal for any job, let alone something as high profile or as... my skill isn't nearly as specific or narrow as, only 20 people do this job or whatever. So I just felt like if that's the game that I play or my profession plays, that's the game their profession plays. Of course, you kind of have to both for yourself to make sure you're not jumping from the pan into the fire, right? And you're making a worse move. And sometimes you just kind of got to stoke it a little bit so people go, she's leaving?
And it moves Mercedes into a retention move, right? So,
I don't know. I just took it all as like...
Having said all that, I'm sure some conversations were... well, I'd be stumped if it didn't.
I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did.
They had to have. But that's
There's
not
only
the
10
kind of
teams.
things you want out there,
No. I agree with Ted. Ted's response was, don't tell Christian any secrets. Yeah, that seemed to be the big takeaway, right?
Right. The other question was, can Fernando hold on to his terrific season and hold on to fourth in the driver's title? That was a big talking point going on.
Of course, yeah, because him and Sainz were tied, right?
Yep. Could McLaren overhaul Aston Martin and retain fourth in the Constructors' Championship and be the rising phoenix that it appeared they have been after the summer break? That was a talking point. All of these questions, thankfully, were answered.
Yes.
Including a cracker of an article I found over at Autosport today. They had a whole graphic and everything with the top 10 drivers and everything. And it was basically... well, if Red Bull didn't exist, Lewis Hamilton would be the champion this year, and here's second place, third place, and I was like,
okay.
What? Really? This is what we're doing? We're just gonna discount Red Bull like the RB19 Red Bull is some sort of controversial thing that we can just discount and say, well, okay, Red Bull, but if they weren't, this is really what it would have been.
But I think the thing is that something like that works in a game like basketball, right? If LeBron doesn't play for 10 games, what does that mean? Because he plays so many minutes in a game. That's interesting. That's an interesting analysis that the Lakers should consider, that a lot of their team still rests on his shoulders, and maybe that's a problem because he's not a spring chicken anymore. I think football's the same way. Like, you can look at, when this quarterback's out or when this wide receiver's out, because there's so many pieces to put in there. But in Formula One, it's just weird because there's only 20 drivers, of which 4 or 5 might win or possibilities to win the World Drivers' Championship. So it just is weird to try to apply that kind of what if so-and-so wasn't in it in racing in the same way you would do it in basketball or something like that. I just thought that was a weird kind of What? Because they all play the same amount of minutes.
It
you know,
wasn't,
there's nothing to gain.
And it wasn't even 24 hours later, and they're already posting if Red Bull and Max didn't exist, this would have been Lewis's title. And I'm thinking, really? And then Paul texted and said, well, okay, but, if Lewis didn't exist, Nico Rosberg would be a 7-time champion,
But I mean, I think this is like if Michael Schumacher hadn't existed.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Eddie
things
Irvine
would be different.
have been
Duh.
champion. Yeah. Yeah, it's
okay,
just silly.
that I'm not okay with. Michael Schumacher, thank you for existing. Like nobody wants. We already have to have JV as a world champion. We don't need Eddie Irvine as a world champion. Let's bring it down a notch.
Yeah. Okay, Rubens Barrichello. We'll go with that.
That would be joyful. Who wouldn't want Rubens to be world champion?
I think
we would love that. But Eddie Irvine, not so much. But yeah, I don't know. I think for me, my biggest through line going into this, and granted, like you noted, it was a very full Sunday sports-wise. I'm just glad it's over. I can't. This is too many races. I don't go to the I'm not a professional. I'm not Will Buxton or somebody. I'm not Martin Brundle. I don't go to the races. I don't have to prepare anything for the races. If I don't want to watch a race, nothing happens. I'm done. This is too many races. I mean, last podcast I was complaining that 4 things in a weekend was too much, and 27 Ted's notebooks. I can't do it. Across the season, I can't do it. It's too much.
Yeah.
It's too much. I watched the Braun GP documentary. They only used to have 15 races. 15 races. That seems like a joy. I'm like, the season ended in October. I can't. Only 14 weeks in the off season. I can't. I need more space. I need more time. I don't even work it.
It is a lot. It is a lot.
I don't know how those people do.
Yeah, and that's what the teams are saying. More races would be physically impossible for the crew that they have that goes to all the races.
So many threes in a row.
Yeah, I mean, even Sky, they'll set Damon Hill down for a race or two and give him a break, which I commend him for. But yeah, the teams don't get a break like that,
No, right. There isn't a backup, whatever.
Yeah, even Toto stayed home for a race or two, but not Franz Tost. Yeah. He was there every race.
No, of course not. But I just think I wish they would. I mean, they never do, right? That never happens. Once it's out there, nobody pulls it back. But if they would like to consider pulling it back a little bit, that would be great.
Tone it down.
I'd like some scarcity.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into the review. Let's talk about the teams as they finish. We're going to start off sharp into the grid. No surprise here, Red Bull, Sergio Perez in P4, Max Verstappen P1. Max had a little bit of a fight on the first lap or two with Charles, but was able to hold him off, only ceding the lead briefly as he cycled through his two-stopper to work and to win. Not quite sure what the struggle was early in the weekend as Max looked off the pace in all of the free practice sessions. Here's my take on it. Perhaps they were trying something out for 2024 or trying something setup-wise. I don't know. You would have to do a hard sale job on me to convince me that they're just really struggling on getting the right setup.
No.
Car,
I mean, you're always
not with that driver.
No, but you're always trying new things, right? You don't just keep doing the same thing, right? Because nobody else is either, right?
Yeah.
So to stand still is to fall behind, right? It's just like when they're like, oh, we're not cutting your budget. We're just going to hold it still. No, that's cutting my budget. Holding it the same is cutting my budget, right? Because everything else continues to cost more. It's the same idea. If you just stay still, everything else is going to pass you. So, of course, they're trying new things. Although, I do love that he has so many issues trying to get out of the pit lane. That was great. I enjoy, there's some it was harmless joy that I got from the fact that he's like, I can't get past anybody. Oh, Max, just hold on.
Yeah.
But I thought, I think that for as much as I am not a Red Bull fan, and I don't think you can take anything away from Max. I think he's had a stellar season. He had a stellar race. I thought the race he had with Charles there, like you were mentioning in the beginning, was good. And, I liked Perez. I think I'm glad that he got P2. I think for everybody, that's, one off the checklist that he was able to finish in second in the World Drivers' Championship. I think that things were looking a little bleak there maybe for him. But,
For sure.
I've always been a Perez fan, and, he's a former McLaren driver. So a success for Perez is a success for McLaren. So,
Yeah, right.
I think he did a good job. And I think for as much as people give Max, I guess I always just view Max as like Kimi. Like, Max just, he says what he says, and you just kind of go, okay, Max. Like Vegas, he got a lot of pushback for all the things he was saying. I'm like, I mean, Kimi said the same, would say this. You ask Kimi his opinion, he goes, yeah, I don't like this. Okay, right? Like, I don't know why this is like a surprise. Just, it's kind of, you apply that to me. I just apply that same thing. He just says his opinion. It's okay. But I thought his kind of commentary towards Franz Toast on the radio was really nice. I think he's, he's probably a very lovely person in person.
No, I think he is.
It doesn't stop me from giving him a hard time, because
I think a lot of
to me
people
is
say
what
that he
sports
is.
are about.
Yeah, personally,
Yeah,
I think they say
that's
he's
fine.
a really good guy. You're right. Imagine what Kimi would say about Vegas. Everybody would think
He'd just
that was
be like,
hilarious, and they'd put it on T-shirts.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
So I think it's all right.
Yeah, Max
go.
had his 19th win of the season in the 22 race calendar, and it can't be ignored of just how hard the men and women Milton Keynes worked to make a car and
Absolutely.
program to perfection. There's no doubt about that. And they beat the snot out of everybody, including my team. And I have nothing but respect for them. It was amazing what they did.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. Sergio, as you mentioned, a little more of a difficult time, and he garnered that penalty for punting Lando off the track, and he recovered very well to P2, assisted by Leclerc, and he was trying to put enough time between him and Sergio to cover his penalty,
Right.
and then denied George P3 and second to the Constructors' title. Unfortunately, Sergio didn't finish 5 seconds ahead of Charles, so he was relegated to fourth, and he wasn't very complimentary of the race stewards after the race, and I think the race stewards were hauling him in. I haven't read today what the penalty was, if any.
I think there has to be some space. I mean, again, because this happens in all sports, right? There's how you treat like this comes up in basketball a lot, because in basketball, the ref's right here, and you're right here as a player, and we can all hear you and see you. Whereas in football, you don't have necessarily you can't see them, right? And you're not right up there on the court line, like you can hear them talking to each other. There's a line. There's for sure a line, but they of course always are like, pleading their case, or like, yo, didn't you see that? There's always some amount of that that's different than like, it's the same thing we talk about, I think, when we talk about, like, I can be like, I don't like Max Verstappen, but I can't say, I'm going to go do something to him that's violent, right? That's a line that's not okay. That's not just fun joking anymore. That is part of the trash talk of sports that's causing some physical violence. So I think it's the same thing with the race stewards. I think they have to have some space to be able to say, I didn't like this. I don't think it's fair. I mean, Carlos Sainz could write a book at this point about what the stewards have done to him. And so I think that there should be some space for that. And it shouldn't just be like you sneezed at the steward's direction, and so you've brought this whole sport into disrepair, or whatever the phrase is I'm trying to. There you go, disrepute. I have something. Anyway, so I don't know. I thought that was all like bogus. Please.
Yeah, I agree.
A person should be able to say, I don't like the call. It wasn't right. I don't agree with it. I'm moving on with my life.
Yeah.
And not get hauled into the stewards for that.
Well, and it's a brilliant clause about bringing the sport in disrepute. But if a driver
It's like
can't
safety.
voice his opinion on it, and they can't say that, and they couldn't say that the Las Vegas thing was a challenging situation. It's you're bringing it in disrepute. So brilliant clause that Max put in.
You don't want this.
Mosley.
You don't want this to become at every press conference, I'm just here so I don't get fined.
Yeah, right.
Like that's the other end of this, right? So we don't want to go there either.
Lewis has been vocal about the FIA and about, in the last 3-4 years, he said some pretty pointed things about the FIA, and Checo is just saying the same thing. I'm not happy with the call. I think the stewards, in aggregate for the balance of the year, weren't that great. Okay.
And I think that's
his opinion.
That's fine, right?
Yeah.
And he can feel that way. I just think that there's space for that, and it's okay. And I don't think that undermines them. Nobody likes the stewards. that's like nobody likes their boss, right? Like there's at some point, like you're my boss. I like my boss. That's not the point, but he's also my boss. So there is a line there, right? So I think it's the same. It's
Nobody
okay.
likes a referee.
No, but you're supposed to be the bigger person, Ray Stewart, and go like, I know you don't like me, but here, well, maybe if they had something to cite, maybe that's the first problem. Like, but you would want like, here's where the rules, why I made the decision the way I made it, and here's what we came up with, and maybe we got it right, maybe we got it wrong, maybe we'll fix it for next year. But
which is what they did with Carlos in Vegas. It is what they did there. They said we don't have a choice. Yeah. We don't think it's great, but we don't have a choice. Let's see. Right. Let's talk about Ferrari. Charles Leclerc in P2, Carlos Sainz in P18. Ouch. Carlos had a tough weekend with a crash in FP2, poor qualifying. This put his Ferrari on the back foot and trying to hold off Mercedes for second in the championship. Carlos started on the hard compound tire, and when he boxed, they fitted another set of hards, so he was obliged to stop again. And they waited for a safety car, hoping that would come out. That never came out. And that means he dropped down out of the points into 18th. And this left Lewis and George an open window to score points, which they did. Ouch.
Yeah. Ouch. Ferrari be Ferrarian.
Yeah.
That's my first note. Like, yeah. I mean, what? So, the P2 and the Constructors' Championship was really theirs to lose, and they lost it. I just was like, even not a Ferrari fan, not here to support them, but I was just like, really? Even, come on, man. So, I don't know.
It was tough because Leclerc, like we talked earlier, I mean, Leclerc had a go at Max at the beginning, couldn't make it stick, so he settled in, drove a terrific race, which was bizarre because all of a sudden he started calling strategy in real time, trying to let Sergio through in order to hold George off. And at this point, I mean, he's doing it real time while he's driving a car. At this point, I thought Charles should be the strategy guy at Ferrari if he could do that while he's driving at 200 miles an hour. I thought that was great. He didn't. The other thing he didn't do is he didn't let Checo through and then start backing off and holding George up to ensure that he had a 5-second lead. And Mercedes is quick to say that was a very sportsman of him, et cetera, et cetera. Remember when Lewis and Nico Rosberg and Lewis was totally backing Nico all up into the traffic, trying to do that. And I'd be honest with you, if I was Charles, I would have pulled a Lewis, too. I would have backed George up, so Checo was 5 seconds. But fair play from Charles, and that meant he went down with the ship. And Ferrari sunk to third in the championship, and that's a shame because they were, on balance, the quicker car than Mercedes. And ultimately, Charles said Checo's 5-second penalty really hurt them, and I agree. And it also hurt Checo, too, in Red Bull. But, yeah. So, it was tough. It was just, I'm sitting there as a Ferrari fan. It's like, oh, my gosh. And had Carlos just finished somewhere in the points, 5th, 6th, 7th, something.
It was painful.
It
was painful.
Very different.
I will say, though, that I like Fred Vasseur. I think going into next season with him, like, again, I hope Ferrari kind of keeps, I think it's working. I think it's working for the team. I think he's working as the team principal externally for sure. I assume both internally as well. So I think that's worked out well for them. And come on, Ferrari, it's painful, man.
It is. Painful. As a long-suffering Ferrari. Well, I will admit my jury was out on Fred. He'd been team bosses, but not at something as massive as Ferrari, right? And there's a lot of. Well, there's just a lot of layers to that onion, from expectations to responsibility to politics to everything. And but I agree with you. I think they're going in the right direction. So we'll give it a season or two and see how he does. But I agree.
I agree.
Let's see. Let's talk about Mercedes.
Get down.
Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton P9, George Russell P3. Yes. If you would have asked me if the third and even sometimes fourth fastest car on the grid could finish second in this constructors title, I would have said that would be a very difficult thing to do. But that's exactly what Mercedes did. Lewis had a tough Carlos-like weekend, but managed to scamper his way into ninth, and did so with a bit of a beat-up car after touching Gasly with his front wing. George drove a brilliant race to P3, managed to overcome some crafty thinking from Leclerc and Checo. Teams will often play down the Constructors' title if they don't win the championship. But Toto and Lewis, that would be great. They just kind of play it down. But Toto, after he won, he said they felt like they did win the championship and coming in second. So it is a big deal to even Mercedes to come in second. And if anything else, maybe it's not a big deal to Lewis, maybe sort of to Toto, but it's a big deal for the men and women that work at Mercedes and at that factory, to come in second and to overcome what they were facing at the beginning of the season. And for them to turn that around mid-season, chuck out the old design, bring in that new design, work their tail off, and turn that around, I just think it was a great, great recovery. Them and McLaren both. Very tall order to beat Ferrari, who was a quicker car. But they did it, and it's a testimony to all that hard work from Mercedes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the playing it down is just on stage playing it down, right? On the inside, how could you not be elated, right? And back at the factory in private, they're elated, right?
Yeah.
It's even if that's just not what we see, right? So I think to think that Toto is like whatever, that's definitely not the case, right? There's no way he ever thought. None of us thought, I think, coming into even this last race that they would end up in second, and the Constructors' Championship we thought for sure was going to go to Ferrari. So, they still have a lot of issues ahead of them. I think that's the other side of it. I think that, celebrate today because tomorrow we got a lot of work to do.
Yep.
They got to fix their suspension. Their sprints are trash. I think there's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And I think that similar to McLaren, they run so close to the knife's edge with their strategy that it's like if you go a little bit off, you fall off the island. They need to figure out how to make a little more space so that their plans aren't so fragile, or if things go a little sideways, it doesn't go big sideways. I just don't, and I think McLaren kind of has that same thing. Like when things go their way, it's great, and it's their track, and it's the right temperatures, and it's their this, and it's their that, and McLaren is on it, and they're great. But the second is one of those things is a little out of line, it all goes apart. So I think that's really where Mercedes and McLaren need to focus.
You bring up a really good point, Grace, in that the strategy for Mercedes is on point, generally speaking, and has been for a long time. And I'm curious now. I'd love to talk to a strategy person. Maybe I can get a hold of Bernie and ask her. But when you're calling strategy for the Mercedes of 2014 through 2020, call it, you can call it down to the second because the car's delivering at a performance you expect in the hands of a driver that's delivering what the car can deliver, right? But when it's not like that, and the car, there's a delta, and the car is not predictable, and the driver struggles with confidence in that car, running your strategy down to the second, to your point, not having a little bit of a buffer because of the unknowns, whether it be car fitted with new tires and how it's going to react from a balance standpoint, George or Lewis's confidence in that car on a new set of tires for the first or second stint or whatever it might be. I think those are things that I'm sure the teams take into account. And maybe Mercedes is still executing at a world championship level. But it's tough to do in this year's car. It was tough to do.
I also think in the off season, they need to fix their stupid pit stops. What is taking them so long? I do not understand. Get it together. You could practice those, right? Why are their pit stops so slow? You don't have a plumber being your gas man. What are you doing? Fix your pit stops.
Well,
to quote Christian Horner, fix your damn pit stops. Come on, man.
Well,
they need to work that. they need to fix.
If the pit stops didn't exist, Lewis would be world champion.
You're right, according to Autosport. You're
you go.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But I think that Mercedes should be proud of what they've accomplished, but
sure.
not let that get in the way of what could be better, because I don't think it is just on their it's not Red Bull. Red Bull's like, yeah, we figured it out. We did great. That's not quite Mercedes, right? Some of it is Ferrari didn't figure it out. And that happens, right? That happens in all, sports, and that happens in racing for sure. But there's a lot of things on their list that they got to kind of fix for next year. And so,
in Toto in the press and the interviews, over a race weekend, he's visibly more grumpy about the whole situation and negative about the car, more negative, I would say, about the car. And I totally understand why he would be, because he's a guy that just came off 8 titles in a row, and he's used to winning championships, not winning races, right? And so I understand that. But I hope that when he gets back to the factory, he isn't like grumpy Toto, because before they started winning championships, they weren't winning championships. And I don't think he was grumpy Toto. I think he was motivational Toto. We'll get there, those kind of things. But
more James Vowles, less Toto Wolff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a little more James Vowles, less current Toto. Yeah, and I hope he. I hope he does that, because it's hard for the employees. It's just as hard for them as it is him. And
I think
not that they don't carry the risk that he carries, but yes, it's difficult.
I think we also see him. The drivers leave their helmets on as they're walking back to the garage, right? Like, some of that also is true, right? But we're seeing Toto right in the moment. Yes, of course he's mad and grumpy. Give it a day, give it a week. He's not going to be quite that way. But just like the drivers, on their long walk from the backside of the grid at Montreal. Yeah, right? I think that there is a difference between, in this moment, this isn't what I wanted. This isn't the season he wanted. And for sure, this isn't how he thought it was going to go. But, there are positives to celebrate. There's money to celebrate. And I think they have to have a handle. I feel like if I have some vague handle on what they need to fix, they really understand what they need to fix, right? I think if me watching some content creators can figure this out, Toto, you got it. So
well, that $10+ million will go a long way to curing it.
Yeah, that's right, and
that'll make them a couple new nose cones.
I was gonna say your wind tunnel isn't, actually Stonehenge like Red Bull, so
right.
you should have an advantage there.
Right.
But yeah, so I think you can be both, and I think that's fair. I think it's fair to say, hey, we did a great job, things went our direction, but hey, we got things to fix. I think it's always both. Yeah, you're always trying to improve. I think it's the same thing you said about Red Bull, right? To stand still is to fall behind. Even if they came in P1, they still have to keep working at it.
Yeah, of course.
Because to stand still is to fall behind.
True.
Extra suspension. You got it.
Let's see, McLaren, Lando Norris P5, Oscar Piastri P6. Unlike Ferrari, McLaren were able to hang on to fourth in Constructors' Championship by beating Aston Martin. Lando had a good start, got around his teammate, but a long pit stop and tire struggles made it hard to advance any further than P5, and he was pretty much stuck there. He said that's about as good as we could get.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, he was very unhappy with his qualifying performance, and then said that's about all I could get out of the car. Oscar also struggled with his tires and pace, so bringing them home P5 and P6 for points was a good result for the team, who looked the mirror opposite, really, of Aston. McLaren's a team that started poorly and turned everything around mid-season, and that's to be commended. And a huge congratulations to all the men and women at Woking that worked their tail off to do that. Whereas, Aston Martin started off really strong and then kind of mid-season started to struggle, right? So, polar opposites.
McLaren doesn't have a Stroll. I mean, that helps, right? Not that Lando and Oscar are Fernandos, but they aren't two Strolls either, so that has to work in their favor. But I I think, short of the Perez incident of he hit me, he ran into me, I thought Norris looked good. I thought Oscar looked good. I am a little worried. I do think that Lando's getting a little into the Charles Leclerc post-race, interviews kind of, or Thursday interviews where everything is just, I don't want to say, everything's negative. That's not really quite what I mean. But, he's getting very down on himself and, it's a race and that kind of stuff. And so I hope that Zach is paying attention, giving him the Bonato pep talk, this isn't your fault. We're here with you. We're behind you. We're building a car that's going to work for you. I think it has to be hard because Piastri came in on the upswing. You know what I mean? Lando's had to struggle, and now it's hitting the upswing. And Oscar's just coming in and having an upswing. And that has to be hard, right? That has to be demoralizing. So, to me, I think Norris's psyche is what I worry about more. I don't want to... To me, it just... Every interview, he just sounds... They're like, wow, you had a great race. And he's like, yeah, I guess. We finished fifth. Yeah. That's where I thought we would be. It's just a very, not we're used to him. And I think that... from a McLaren perspective, and as a McLaren fan, you want two people that are closer to Fernando than two people that are close to Lancey, but that could be hard, right? That if Oscar just continues to have success and didn't really struggle at all in his rookie year, that could be very problematic for their chemistry.
Yeah, your point on that, I would think, I was just sitting there thinking about that too when you mentioned it, because I was thinking, I understand what you're saying. He can either be down on himself, down about the race. I think it's just his personality. But on the flip side of it, if I was Zach, I would be looking at it and thinking, okay, so, he may be a kind of guy that does struggle finding motivation to run fourth and fifth. He clearly has talent to win. Mm-hmm. And win titles. He's incredibly fast, but the car won't allow that. We often ask, how does Lewis stay motivated for 7 titles? Mm-hmm. How do you keep that level of motivation going? Or as George Russell would say, he'd do this. But how do you keep that going? Well, maybe it's a little more difficult for Lando. He's mm-hmm. right there, ready to strike, ready to go for championships. So he's not in a car that can. So and close. How do you keep that motivation? And, it's very difficult. I keep a close eye on Lando, and I'm sure they are.
Yeah, I think so, too. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they are. And, and Zach is definitely the, I'm just going to put my arms around you kind of guy, right? He's not Ron Dennis, right? I would be really worried if Ron Dennis was the team principal about Lando's state of being. But, with Zach, I just think that's staying motivated, that's staying focused. I don't want him to be fake. I'm not saying that I don't want him to... I don't suddenly want him to be George Russell. If that's not who you are, that's not who you are. That's fine. Right. And, if this is just your state, that's fine. Not everybody's going to be Lewis Hamilton, or George Russell or something like that in the press. But I just don't think he's always kind of been this way this whole season. And it has to wear on him that he's been so close to winning a race and yet has not won a race. And
it would be.
I can only imagine. So I think they're doing great. I'm glad that they're carrying this into next year. My little papaya team is looking good. Maybe I'll actually believe it. We'll see. We'll see in 14 weeks how I feel about
Lando
that.
24.
I don't know. I'm never really quite ready to, fully send on McLaren. It's a hard place to be with fandom, but I think it's good. I think they're looking good. Oscar's looking good.
So let's talk about Aston Martin. All right, Fernando Alonso, P7, Lance Stroll, P10. If you were to sum up the race for Aston Martin, it would almost kind of sum up their season. Fernando drove his heart out and secured 4th in the driver's title, but Lance, he left a lot on the table on Sunday, and that's ultimately, in my personal opinion, what cost them 4th in constructors title. It's missing those points from that second car, right? It's tough because Lance's previous 2 races, he had a P5, so my expectations coming in this race, I thought he would kind of have a repeat, like he'd come out of that
Yeah.
slump, and he had 2 P5s on the trot. I was expecting him to be top 10 here, take that fight to McLaren, but he really struggled to make his way back up. Still, I'm not picking on him. It's been a terrific year for Aston Martin, and they have to be happy about including the run in Abu Dhabi with Fernando undercutting his way forward and Lance recovering back to 10th for a point, and with that long first stint on the hard. So, I'm not beating them up. They should be very, very happy about what they've achieved. That team really turned it around.
Oh, yeah.
Over the offseason and then hit the ground running this year with Fernando. Maybe they got a little outdeveloped mid-season. Maybe they switched their focus to next year. Hard to know exactly what caused that.
Maybe they had some, eyeballs from the FIA on their wings. Maybe that didn't help them out too much either. I'm just saying,
Just saying.
I'm just asking for a friend, and maybe you should check out their wings. Maybe there's some issues.
Yeah, who
Just
knows?
saying. But that seemed to do them in. But I think going back to the always Alonso 08. But what if there was 2 Alonsos at that team and no Lance Strolls, right? Going back to your what if Red Bull didn't exist?
What if
right?
Lance didn't exist?
Or his facial hair. I don't know what's. I'm over that too. He can.
Oh really?
I
I kind of liked it.
You like the facial
Well,
hair?
I've got a beard, so yeah.
It doesn't mean you have to like him. I don't have a beard, but some guys look good in a beard. Lance, I don't know, not so much. But, well, at least not that you guys know of. But anyway, I think that's. I don't know. Anyway, I just think that, it's hard, and I think it's hard because they're not going to get rid of Lance. I don't see that happening, and.
I don't either.
He really was what hurt them this season.
Well, and look, at the end of the day, it's not that I feel sorry for him. That's the decision Lawrence is going to make, and then he's got to live with the results. And so, if you missed out on $10 million, then that's your deal. So,
but I think this is, but this is great for Alonso. I think of Alonso. I mean, because how many more years has that guy got in him? Right? What is 44?
42.
42. All right, finish out your career at Aston. I think if they keep in this way, this is all ups for Alonso, right? Like, I think this is what you would have hoped Michael Schumacher going to Mercedes would have looked like, right? Yeah. It did not, but this is what I think we would have all wanted. What you would have
hoped Vettel at Aston Martin would have turned into.
Exactly. And so Alonso just can keep getting them on this. They've got this new facility. They've got all this stuff ahead of them. Let's just keep Alonso on this trail, and then he can win a World Drivers' Championship again, and then he can retire at 48. It'll be fine.
And Lawrence said that he was elated with their season. He should be. He absolutely should be.
He's seen a return in that investment, right? Which you don't often see in this sport. So,
and it's not.
He's putting it in there.
It's not just Lance. Okay, Lance left points on the table, but you've got to look at it in total. But anyway, they both scored points, so it's hard to get too harsh. AlphaTauri, Daniel Ricciardo P11, Yuki Tsunoda P8. Yuki ran a long first stint going for that one stopper, and this left him leading as the faster cars cycled through their stops. On worn tires, he managed to hang on for P8 as a parting gift to team boss Franz Tost, and a terrific drive from Yuki. And he's really kind of been on song the last 2 or 3 races. And I think, polite golf applause for Yuki, because the upgrades to this car really have found a home with him, and I think he's maximizing that. So so kudos to Yuki. I'm elated for him. Even if I don't like his potty mouth and constantly slamming the team and being a hothead. But anyway, I thought it was good. For Dan, though, he had that tear off get stuck in his brake duct, and that's a shame because he had he nipped into the points, they had a chance of overtaking Williams at the constructors' title and taking 7th. But Dan had to stop. This put him at the back, and he recovered to 11th. He felt like if he had a lap or 2 more, maybe that he felt the pace was there. Maybe they could get a few more points, and he was bummed about that. But anyway, that's where they finish. And Grace, now we won't have France to push around anymore, and that's sad.
I know, right? I know, it is sad. I think that's sad. I loved Yuki's helmet. I mean, everything there was,
great.
was super nice, right? And I think that I did want to have some conversation about their, like, you know how cars, when they're at the Nürburgring, they always have that black and white livery. Like, I don't know, is that a Porsche? I don't know what that Spy livery, will I be able to tell? Because of course they want you to know that it's their car, right? Like, who are we kidding here, right? Like, oh, is that a Corvette at the Nürburgring? I don't know. I can't tell through the Spy livery. It's totally what their livery reminded me of. I'm like, I think we still know it's you. You don't need the Spy livery going around the Nürburgring. We got it. You're a Porsche. We know who you are.
See,
but I thought that
I even made a meme.
Aww.
It says when F1 gives you a Japanese driver as a participation gift for your 18 years of service.
There you
Made
go.
That for TikTok.
Yuki,
there you go.
Yuki's gonna live with you now.
Yes. Yuki, he can go home, set up the cot for Yuki. You know, in the evenings, they have a little beef stew, a little glass of wine, reflect on their years together at AlphaTauri / Toro Rosso.
They can bring Jason Statham over too. Who
Yuki can
help him.
Yuki can help him author his autobiography.
It would be great. I would love it. You would know the parts that Yuki ghost wrote, though.
It
that's
was another
for sure.
effing race, and we did effing terrible.
Yeah, like he would have to add some more, just anything, because I don't know. Franz Tost strikes me as a noun, verb, direct object kind of guy. Again, the opposite of Ron speak is Franz Tost speak, right?
He's not a loquacious fellow.
No, right. So you definitely need, like a Ron Dennis ghostwriter to help make that more than like
and
3
who better
pages
than
long,
Yuki?
Because I think that would be great. I think that would be a lot of fun.
That would be good.
There'd be a lot of time spent on him and Gasly for sure in the book, but that'd be great. So I think that for Yuki especially, but for AlphaTauri in general, like they just needed a little bit longer in the season. Like
They were getting there.
Not that I'm encouraging there to be more races. Please don't have more races.
Grace wants 26 races.
I think if Alpha had a few more races, they would have been a lot closer to Williams. I think they were finally getting their head around it, and
he needed to finish in 6th. I think, to take the position, and he finished 8th. So it was that close.
So they just need a little more time, and they just didn't have it.
Agreed. Alpine, speaking of Gasly, P13 for Pierre, Esteban Ocon, P12. Pierre had some contact with Lewis, and this did some damage. He actually said he saw the car afterwards, did pretty extensive damage to his diffuser, so he struggled with that for a good portion of the race. That really set him off. Or set him towards the back. He was drifting back a little bit after that. But what set him off was the team boxing Ocon before him and the undercut, cutting Pierre and putting Pierre behind Esteban. He was not happy about that.
Oh, no.
And that put him on his back foot. And he came on P13. Esteban did the one-stopper, got undercut, got the undercut done on Pierre, moved up to P12. And Gasly also had contact with Checo too. So he had 2 situations on track that weren't fun. But not a happy Pierre.
Nope.
And
I just felt like at one point Gasly was on the radio like, "Why are we so slow?" I don't know, Pierre. You've been at this team for a year. Have you never paid attention to Renault before? Have you never watched how this team exists? Like every year, we do our like season preview. Like Alpine is always like, they're a middling team. They're never committed. They're never fully sent. It's painful to watch. Everything about Alpine, you're just like, could you just lean into a little bit and you'd be a little more successful.
It should be at the sharp end.
Yeah, apparently Gasly just now figured out. I'm like, sir, you're at Alpine. I'm not sure what you were expecting. This is exactly what they do every year.
Thinking, we got Ryan Reynolds now. We should be winning
they have
races.
Like 87 owners now.
Yeah, but he didn't care about all that. It's got Ryan Reynolds here. Did he own a mobile phone company, for crying out loud?
Yeah.
Come on.
McElhaney, But I just think that,
Yeah, what does that guy do?
McElhaney? What's his first name? He's an actor.
In what?
He was on Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
And what else?
I don't know. That doesn't mean anything.
Everybody talks to me like he's an A-list, like he's Tom Cruise, or it's like I've never seen the guy. I don't know who he is.
Yeah, that's what I know him from.
I mean, no offense to
made
that
to
guy. I'm
D.
sure he's a great actor. I don't know him because I don't watch that show. So, but everybody speaks as if he's had a decades-long film career, won 5 Oscars, and I don't know who the guy
Well,
is.
he's not George Clooney. I mean,
That's what
right?
I'm saying.
Like, I don't,
but then
I
when they
don't-
are on the grid, it's like, oh my gosh, he's on the. Oh my god! And I was like, I don't know who he is. I know Ryan
That's
Reynolds,
like-
but
That's like half of the people at any one of the grid, especially the British Grand Prix. I just assume that they're all soccer players. I don't know who that guy
I
is.
don't know all the soccer
Must be a
players.
soccer player.
And they come up there, and they probably are one of the greatest that's ever played the game, and I don't have a clue who it is.
I have no idea.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah, it's like playing Trivial Pursuit, and you'd get a tennis question, and my answer was always Andre Agassi. Well, I don't know.
John McEnroe? I don't know.
Right, exactly. I don't know. Right, that's just not an area that it's not one of the 700 sports I
Martina?
watch in a given weekend. Right, exactly. So I don't know. I never know who people are, and although sometimes neither does Martin Brundle, and it's a fun time for all of us. But
Yeah.
yeah. I just,
All
you know,
right.
it's the same thing. Like when they're zooming in on the people in the pit box. I'm like, I don't know. Let's play soccer.
Let's talk about Williams, shall we? Alex up on P14, Logan Sargent P16. Alex didn't get a very good stop, dropped backwards, but he got the bit between his teeth, fought his way back up to P14 where he started. Got past Zhou Guanyu in order to do that. Finished where he started in P14. Said he really, bottom line is, Trek just said suit the car and the lack pace, period. Logan, very much the same. Started in P20, made up 4 places, finished in P16. The team were anxiously watching Yuki, but in the end, Yuki managed to finish 8th. This left Williams in P7 of the Constructors' title, so that was good for them. It's huge. And unfortunately, I think Logan certainly did have a good race, getting from 20 to 16.
Yeah.
Albon finishing where he started. I think both cars, the drivers, both of them said we just, for whatever reason, the car just simply did not have any pace around here.
Yeah.
So,
I think shout out to the James Val guy. I've been hearing some good things about him.
watch that
I think
guy. He
he's-
might be a good team boss someday.
I'm just saying, he's onto something there, and I think that his motivational speeches has also improved during the course of the year. So I think that's also been fun to watch. But
Indeed.
I think Williams. This is it. I don't know. I don't have any other comparison than basketball, but like a lot of times basketball coaches, like they can get you to here, right? And you need somebody that can get you to here, right? And so maybe it was just like Williams just kind of kept being it. I realize that if you're watching a podcast, I just made a hand gesture, you can't see. But a lot of times coaches can kind of get you to this middle point where you're successful, but not to the like point of playoffs, not to that like next level of getting to the playoffs and
You
maybe
need an
getting to the
Andy
finals and
Reid
maybe
to
getting a
get
championship.
there.
Right. And so I feel like that they've had this kind of space where they've been, and that James Vow is that coach that can kind of just like push them into the playoffs and push them into a championship level team. And that's what they've been looking for a long
Agreed.
time, is just somebody who's been there, who has World Drivers' Championships and Constructors' Championships under his belt, came from Mercedes, and just kind of knows what it takes and knows how to kind of get people in the right frame of mind to kind of push them into a playoff level team instead of just like we finish races kind of team. So
he is one sharp cookie, that is for sure.
I do think it'll be interesting to see what they do with the second seat, since I'm pretty sure it's not going to go to Sargent, because again, when James Val kind of goes, oh, we're not sure about that second seat, you're not getting it. And we had
That's not good. Grace.
And we had like 10 new drivers, in FP1? Yeah, those guys got money.
Yeah,
So.
but it's Logan Sargent. Come on, Grace. He's an American. F1 will grow. Americans will be huge fans if it just had an American driver.
Says Scoot Speed. I just don't think that is a requirement, clearly. Because if that was the case, you would have all been watching MotoGP a long time ago when there were like 6 Americans in that sport.
The
But
Kentucky kid,
I digress. So I think
All right.
that...
Are we done with Williams? No?
I don't know. I just think it'll be interesting to see who gets that second seat, because that for sure is going to go to somebody with money, and whether that person is Logan Sargent, who brings enough money, or somebody else who brings enough money.
Could be Paul Cherzley.
It could be. There were 10 new people there, so
yeah.
I don't know.
Never know. Let's see. We are down to Haas with Nico Hulkenberg, P15, Kevin Magnussen, P20.
Yeah.
A tough weekend for Haas with Kevin down to P20. Kevin said the only positive thing out of this weekend for him was that it was the last race of the season.
We agree on something. Look at that.
Ooh, that's
except it's not my career, right?
Yeah,
like,
right. Oh.
I'm just a dude at home watching
I
this.
know. Kevin locked up early, flat spotted his tires, had to box for that, dropped in the back, couldn't really fight back up, had no pace. Nico had a bad start, drifted out of the points, and he said that it wasn't degradation they were having issues. It's just a pure lack of pace. They could not find the pace. And at this point, I feel, can I go a little bit of a tangent? I feel...
It's your show.
Thanks, man. I feel really bad for the team because they're working their tail off and just not getting the results, having enough resources to do whatever it is they're trying to do. These men and women are working their tail off at Haas. And don't get me wrong here. I'm not trying to be purposely mean. I'm just trying to be real here. That the only person that seems to have capitalized on this entire Haas program is Gunther Steiner with his book deals and his TV deals, his Drive to Survive fame. And I got to be honest with you, I don't think that's what Gene signed up for, is to make Gunther a superstar. And it's making me wonder. I would have done this already, but it's making me wonder. A, why didn't you just sell your team to Andretti? If this is where you're going, and give the men and women who work for you a real chance to be a successful growing team. Yeah. Or maybe it's time to find your own James Vowles. Yeah. I'm just saying. You think, oh, well, it's not Gunther's team's money. Well, but is it? Williams is working on a very limited budget too, and James Vowles came in, boom, instantly made an impact. Right?
How long has Haas been at this? 5 years? How long has it been in the sport?
Something like that, or more.
Again, I think that kind of talk maybe applies like drivers, right? Like, oh, okay, your rookie year, okay, Logan Sargent, well, all right, but like year 5, nobody's like, oh, Logan Sargent, okay, you got some growing pains, get out, right? Like, I don't know, this isn't a sport that really sustains growing pains for very long, but for sure, I agree with you 100%. I'm just add to your conversation. I'm adding to your rant with more rant. Yeah. A little cherry on top of your rant.
I got nothing against
Get
Gunther.
It together.
I like Gunther. I think he's great. He's hilarious. But it just, they
have to change.
I feel worse about Gene's money.
I mean, I think it's the same thing we would say about. It's been the theme of the show. If you stand still, you're falling behind, right? Yeah. They're standing still. They're already last. That's the only reason they're not falling further behind.
I know.
So.
And I feel for the team members, all of the men and women who work for that team, working their fingers to the bone, trying to make something happen, and it's just not happening. And there's some smart people at that team.
Yeah,
it's not happening.
I don't get the sense that they're like a Minardi or a Jordan of old, right?
No.
They were also backmarker teams, but they had a very different ethos, and they served a very different purpose on the grid than Haas is serving for any of us right now.
I agree. Time to shake things up.
I do think that it will be a missed opportunity if they don't call his TV show Better Call Gene. I think that would be the greatest title of the show. Better Call Gene.
Very good.
Because that's all he does. And I do want to give a shout out to K-Mag's daughter, who was adorable.
Oh my gosh, was that not adorable?
She's adorable.
That was my moment of the race, showing her helping her dad put on the gloves.
I know.
Wonderful.
And she's like, because that's what parents do for kids all the time. Like, you roll the little gloves up so they can put their hands in them, like you do a sock. Like, so cute that she was like, okay, now I'm going to help you put your gloves on. Aww.
Yeah, that melted me. As a father of 2 daughters, that just instantly melted me.
Super sweet.
Wonderful.
It was really the best thing I got for Haas was K-Mag's daughter.
I agree. And then finally, Alfa Romeo, Valtteri Bottas, P19, Zhou Guanyu, P17. Valtteri did a one-stopper, but the mediums proved really a bridge too far. He just did not have any pace, and those mediums wore out pretty quick, he said. No word yet on how many butt pictures he sold, but we'll see. No pun intended.
I mean, those were my notes. Was like, well, I hear the Bottas calendar is night, and you will all be happy to know that is not what I got Todd as his gift this year. It is not a Bottas butt calendar, so you can all rest assured that is not his gift.
Yeah. Let's see. And then Joe did a two-stopper. That worked better for him, but he too said he just absolutely no pace. And they finished second to last, Alfa Romeo. So, and at the end of this year, Alfa Romeo's gone, man. They're like, woo, we're tired of being at the back, and we're out of here. No, that's not what they said. Audi took it over. They'll rename it. Who knows? It'll be Sauber something probably, but we'll see. So new names for Alfa Romeo, Sauber next year, and for AlphaTauri. Be looking for that.
So that's good because then we won't have two Alphas on the grid, which is nice.
That's confusing.
But, Alpha went from having the best logo to being the four-fifths Olympics. So I'm gonna miss the snake eating a man. That may be the best thing that team ever brought to any of us.
It is.
We'll wish him a farewell, and hopefully they'll do better.
Yeah. I think Valtteri ought to give the CEO of Alfa Romeo a butt calendar on his way out as a consolation prize.
Or just a picture of Bottas as the guy being eaten by the snake, right?
Could be, with his butt.
Right. Turned around,
right? Turned around exactly. With his butt hanging out of the mouth. That would be
exactly nice. That I think would be a great picture. So
no butts. All right, let's give some words away. First, the word of the podcast is move the race.
Seriously, Todd?
Yes, seriously. Grace, I think you and I had the same. What did we pick for move the race?
So I really did, as I mentioned earlier, wanted to give move of the race to Verstappen and his pit lane problems because I thought those were very entertaining moves, if not, great on-track move. I did enjoy it, but I'm ultimately going to give it to Charles Leclerc. And I think because of his Sebastian Vettel-like in-car, real-time, Supreme Court arguing, brain power going on there with letting Perez by and, trying to get some more points for Ferrari. And we certainly didn't hear Ferrari suggesting any of that. So I just think, hats off, move of the race to Leclerc for sure. And
Charles Leclerc. I gave it to Charles Leclerc, too.
I'm glad that somebody there is a master tactician. And, I just think that... Oh, hi, Ziggy. Oh, we almost had a whole show without a cat showing up. She was like, no, the move of the race is mine. Back up Charles Leclerc. I'm here for my award. But I think that not only do I want to give it to Charles Leclerc, but I also know that, Stefano Domenicali is listening to this podcast, long time, first time. And I just want to say, if you want people to get into the sport, play less of the radio that is the, oh, he hit me. Oh, I ran him over. Oh, he didn't give me space stuff that they play all the time. Play more of this. Play more Sebastian Vettel. Play more. Well, I mean, you can't now, but I mean that in-car tactician, because they all have to be that way. I mean, we don't always get to hear the radio, and I always talk about Vettel being that way because Vettel's would always, be like, writing legal briefs while driving the car, and that's what we saw from Charles Leclerc. Right. So even just the push like a lion, like any of that kind of stuff, that's what they need to be playing over the radio. Lean into how smart these guys are. Lean into this tactician skill that they have or the teams have. And, we don't have refueling anymore. So the pit stops don't quite bring that same level of strategy to it. But here's an opportunity to do that. Play those radios. Somebody picks these.
Not just all
more
the whinging.
That. Yes. We don't need to hear about, anybody's tires anymore. Play these kind of things where you really hear how the teams and the drivers kind of pull things together and the real conversations are having over the radio and not just oh, he pushed me wide. Oh, he hit me. Oh, I'm old man waving fist at sky.
It's a great point because they, of all the ones they play with Lewis, it's usually those kind. It just makes Lewis seem like a whiner or like he doesn't have a clue what's going on. You know,
That's not what people, if you complain. So the thing is now is, I said last time I was on the podcast, when people complain that Formula One races are boring, I'm like, welcome. You're a real fan now. You've learned, right, that the sport has an ebb and a flow just like all sports do. Congratulations. I welcome you into Formula One now. But, we're going to have to get beyond this, like, lowest common denominator, argy-bargy, crashy thing that for some reason people think that's what people want out of a sport. That isn't what they want.
It's not. It's not. And, if you were frustrated and newer to Formula One, you just saw a pretty average season with a dominant team. I mean, this kind of happens,
Right.
McLaren's done it before. Mercedes has done it before. Red Bull's done it even more than those two.
Mm-hmm.
So this kind of happens from time to time.
Yeah. You have this opportunity. Don't let it pass you by.
Right. All right. Next award is Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
All right. Who did you have? Donkey of the Race, Grace.
Oh, I gave it to the race stewards. Which series?
You
you
and
don't
Checo.
know. Am I mad about Perez and that petty nonsense? Am I mad about Bez and Marquez? Am I mad about Martin and Marquez? Am I mad about the Steelers game? You don't know, because all of them suck. I'm tired of race stewards deciding too much and ruining my sports, plural. So, I'm over it. And I watched we almost made it through the whole show without me bringing up MotoGP, but they also had their finale this weekend, and it actually went down to the last kind of. We all knew that Ben Yai was going to win it, but it actually came down to the last race of the season, and because it was still there on the sprint. But when we talk here all the time about how nobody cares about tires. For some reason, tire pressure and minimum tire pressure has been the thing in MotoGP. I'm over it. Digi should not have lost P2. He almost passed Ben Yaya for P1. If he just had a few more laps, he totally would have been there. And he got demoted because of tire pressure. Please, I'm over this. Like, I'm over them. And I'm over this whole Perez, you have to be nice to the stewards. No, you don't. You can't lambaste people. You can't badmouth people. You can't threaten people's lives. But you can for sure say, I am not happy with this. The same way that, Bez was not very happy about Marc Marquez getting, the superstar rules and, completely ruining his racing, completely pushing him off track, and nothing happened to him. He can say that. He can say, I am unhappy about this, and I think you should have done something about it, but you never do because it's Marc Marquez, and we're not going to do anything about it. And I think that happens in every sport, and it's dumb. I'm tired of it.
There you go.
I will add one more thing before I get accused of, of bringing too
the
much
sport
MotoGP
into disrepute.
Maybe. I am also mad at McLaren's slow pit stop with Norris. McLaren usually has the fastest pit stops in any race. Sometimes that's the only thing that McLaren has in any given race. And you had that one really slow pit stop with
That hurt.
I almost called him Loris, boy. Lando Norris. And that's just not okay.
Yeah,
so
tough.
I do also give Donkey of the Race to the entire McLaren pit stop crew as well.
Yeah. I gave it to Checo for hitting Lando and getting the penalty.
Yeah.
Because without that, he'd have been P2 possibly, or P3 at least, possibly P2.
Yeah. It wasn't needed.
And then final award is Drive of the Race.
Get down. Get down.
It's an end of this.
Oh, boy. Drive of the Race. Who'd you give it to?
I gave it to Yuki Tsunoda because you
Heck
all owe him an apology.
Yeah, the Ukester.
That's right. Yeah, he finished P8, but he took it to Lewis.
He
fought
did?
for everything out there yesterday.
You did.
It didn't really necessarily matter at the end of the day, but he looked great.
You did look
And
good.
I appreciate it, and all you Yuki Tsunoda haters, you better be appreciating it too. So
I don't hate you. Well, I don't like his radio berating the team constantly. I think that sounds really bad. But having said all that, he for me was right on the cusp of what you were saying earlier. You've been there 3 years. It's put up or shut up time.
yeah, for sure.
And he's starting to put up, which is great. That's great. happy about that. I did not pick. Well, I could pick Yuki, and I probably would have. But since you picked Yuki, let me spread the love. I'm gonna give it to Charles Leclerc. And yes, I'm a Ferrari fan, and yes, I know it's biased, but I really do think Charles had a great race.
Did, no, I mean,
and he was outthinking his own
He was
strategy team at 200 miles an hour, and I just think that was a brilliant race for Charles.
I think so too. I think if you were a Alpine fan and you picked Ocon, I might accuse you of favoritism and not actually of watching the race that I watched, but you didn't. I think picking Leclerc is absolutely a right pick.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
Of course. Of course, being a Ferrari fan, there's only 10 teams.
Yeah,
so,
right. You got to be. Yeah, exactly. I had to pick one.
You're not going to be a Haas fan, so.
Yeah, right. Let's see. All right, and finally, let's do some mailbag. We got F1 Lump asked this. Hey guys, due to the ridiculously small amount of time teams have to test and set up cars for a weekend, can either of you tell us why the clock continues to run during red flags in practice sessions? I assume it's a time and money thing, but thought you could confirm. Keep up the great work. F1 Lump.
Keep it spicy.
Thoughts, Grace?
I don't know. When he posed that question, I was like, I don't know. I'd never asked that question.
No,
I think it keeps it spicy.
Yeah, I didn't have time today to go look for the actual regulations on the timing, and I apologize for that. The day job got in the way, but it is
not what we're paid for.
Yeah, it is a timing issue because remember, like the Formula One races only have 3 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, to run, and you've got to get that in that time frame. Now you can have a red flag and stop the lap counts and the time and all that, but it'll time out maximum at a couple hours, and that's what it is. And so the practices are an hour each, and they're timed for the amount of time. And because the schedule for the day is set, if there's other series running in between practice sessions, then they can't run long because then the start time for the other series aren't, as malleable as you might expect. And it's in the regulations about that time. That's the time from, 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, that's the time. And if you red flag, it doesn't matter, that's the time. And so, and they've never really had that flexibility just to change weekends around. You've got broadcast schedules and everything else. If you're there at the race and they change it an hour, it's not the end of the world. But if a broadcast schedule and ESPN's trying to show practice at 2 o'clock and it's an hour later and then they're running into other programs, it doesn't work. So, it's a timing issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure. I mean, I think when I say to make it spicy, I think it makes the strategy interesting, right? Because if you have something like FP2, if you thought, FP1, we're going to run all our new guys, it's fine. We have plenty of time. Right. And then you got to FP2 where you had 2 yellow flags, and you're like, oh no, maybe we don't have enough time, right?
Right.
I think that keeps it interesting. But I think you're right. I mean, at a track like Montreal or at Austin, where like from 7 to like 5, somebody's racing on the track, right? So. Right, if Formula One runs late, you're running into my Porsche Cup race. What are you doing? Or you're running into my Ferrari Challenge race or my GP2 race. And so, I mean, if you're at the track, short of like Vegas or, China or someplace like that, where it's like one race and that's all we came for was just Formula One, most of the time they're running other things and they have to keep on schedule.
Get your hands off my bloody Porsche.
That's right. It's the TV time. And for sure, right? That's a lot of time that's been chunked out, and
there you go.
Just move that. So,
all right,
there you go.
Great question. Appreciate it as always.
Good question.
That does it for this podcast. That was the last race of the season. But here's the good news. Unlike a lot of other places, we don't roll up the sidewalks. We keep going all winter long.
14 straight weeks of this. Are you ready for it?
That's right. 14 straight weeks. I don't even know if Paul's going to grace us with an appearance over the winter. Who knows? But you've got 14 weeks. We don't stop. We keep talking Formula One all winter long while everyone else has kicked their feet up and phoned it in. And that's it. Not us, man. even if we don't have a bunch of news to talk about, we're talking about it.
Oh, I'll find something to talk
I'll
about. That
find
is
it.
certainly
Yeah.
it's certainly never stopped us
No,
since
it's never
2005. Like
That's right.
having something to talk about.
Oh yeah, that's
know.
not going to stop us. So we're going to
No.
keep going. So if you like this podcast, go over to your favorite podcast player, whether it's iTunes or whatever it might be. Give us a good rating. A huge thank you to our Patreon supporters and those of you who signed up this past week or two. Really appreciate that. We could not and would not do that without you. So if you're feeling in the holiday spirit and you want to support the podcast that you listen to, you can do that by going to our website, theparcfermé.com. On the right-hand side, you'll see where it says support us. You can click on that, and you can support us as little as $1 a month, and we would greatly appreciate that for sure. Also, a huge thank you to you, Grace, and to Paul for coming in and co-hosting another terrific season for 2023. It's been a wonderful season. And really, I think we also, before we get out of this podcast, on behalf of you, me, Paul, everyone here at TPF, want to say congratulations to Red Bull for a amazing world championship, both drivers, constructors. Congratulations to Max and Sergio, to Christian and the entire team, all the men and women there. Congratulations for an amazing season that you guys put together. It was a joy to watch. And
Except for Christian Horner. I don't really thank him for anything. You and
I
Paul
do,
can
Christian.
thank him. That's fine.
It's tomorrow. I do, Christian.
That's fine.
I've forgiven you for that. It's okay.
We will never let that go. You may have forgiven him, but we will never forget. That is by far one of the funniest moments
it was.
in TPF history. So
It was. So, big
but yeah,
congratulations. And to all the winners. It was a great season. A lot of fun, even mid-pack. Enjoyed it. So, anyway, we will be back next week to do this all over again.
That's
We're going to be
right.
talking about more Formula One news. And until
Hopefully.
that time, next week, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long, Grace.
see you next week.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.